The night sky glowed orange as flames licked at my cornfield, the sweet smell of burning stalks choking the air. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. 3 acres of harvest, the very money I had set aside for my daughter's college tuition, were being reduced to ash. Standing at the fence line was the last person I expected to see, holding a lighter in one hand and a fuel container in the other. Her smug expression twisted into panic the instant those red flashing lights crested the hill. Firefighters leapt from their trucks, racing straight into my property. My neighbor froze, eyes wide, suddenly realizing that this was not going according to her plan. What she had thought would be a private act of destruction was now a public spectacle, captured under the harsh beams of emergency floodlights. But here's the part she never knew. I had been expecting this move for weeks. Every camera was recording. Every sensor was armed. Every official had been warned. What she believed would be the night I lost everything was about to become the night her entire world collapsed. So let me rewind. Let me take you back to where this war began, and how an ordinary farmer found himself battling an entire neighborhood association hell-bent on destroying his legacy. Because once you hear what she tried, and what happened when justice finally caught up, you will never look at neighbor disputes the same way again. My name is Marcus Fieldstone, and I am the 3rd generation to work the same 8 acres in rural Ohio. My grandfather bought this land with nothing more than a handshake and a dream back in 1953. For decades, corn was our lifeblood. Every summer, the fields shimmered gold, and every autumn, we hauled in enough harvest to keep the farm alive and the family secure. But time changes things. Where my grandfather once looked out across endless rows of farmland, I now see sprawling subdivisions. Cookie-cutter houses with vinyl siding and manicured lawns encircle my fields like a tightening noose. The neighborhood has a name that makes me laugh every time: Whispering Oaks Estates, even though they cut down every last oak tree just to build it. My wife, Denise, teaches 3rd grade. My twin daughters, Sarah and Emma, just turned 18. They are college-bound, one chasing veterinary science, the other engineering. That meant tuition bills, $30,000 each per year. Every cent of it was riding on this year's corn harvest. Then came the new neighbor, the self-appointed queen of the homeowners association. She arrived in town with a smile that never touched her eyes, the kind of person who sees land not as history, but as profit margins. She had a background in real estate, and rumors spread quickly that she was less interested in community spirit and more obsessed with flipping properties. I should have known that trouble was coming the day she stepped onto my porch with a clipboard, demanding that my tractor be hidden from street view. It was early spring when she made her first move. I was tightening bolts on my grandfather's old John Deere when the sound of heels clicking against gravel broke the calm. She stood there, immaculate in a tailored jacket, smiling as if we were meeting for afternoon tea. "Hello, neighbor," she began, waving the clipboard like a badge of authority. "We've received multiple complaints about unsightly equipment visible from the road. It is lowering property values." I wiped the grease from my hands and stared at her. That tractor had sat in the same spot for 60 years. "Lady," I said, "that machine has been here longer than your entire subdivision." Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. Then her voice cooled. "Being a good neighbor means considering how your choices affect others. I would hate for this to become unpleasant." The warning was clear. I told her this was a working farm, not a landscape backyard, and the equipment was staying exactly where it belonged. She turned on her heel and marched back toward her sprawling house, heels crunching against gravel like gunfire. For a while, I thought maybe that would be the end of it. I had no idea this was just the opening volley in a battle that would soon consume every corner of my life. 2 days later, I caught sight of a man in a slick suit, pointing at my fields as if she already owned them. That was the moment I realized this was not about tractors. This was about my land. The games began small. One morning, I discovered 3 irrigation hoses slashed clean through. Fixing them cost me half a day in the brutal July sun, my shirt soaked with sweat, the metallic taste of anger burning in my mouth. A coincidence? Hardly. The following afternoon, a county truck rumbled up my drive. The fire marshal stepped out, holding a clipboard with a pained expression. "Marcus, I hate to do this," he said, "but we got a complaint about unauthorized burning on your property." I laughed bitterly. The only smoke that had risen in weeks came from a neighbor 3 miles away. But the complaint had come with photographs, staged at the perfect angle to make it look like the smoke was billowing from my backfield. The harassment escalated day after day. Committee members from the association began showing up unannounced, snapping photos of my barn, pretending to note safety violations. One claimed my compost pile attracted vermin. Another said my rooster was a noise hazard. None of it was true, and all of it felt coordinated. Each evening, I sat on my porch with Denise, looking across the rows of corn that rustled in the warm breeze, wondering how far they would push this game. That was when my old neighbor Harold, a retired postal worker who had lived here long before the subdivisions, shuffled over with a grim look. "She came by my house yesterday," he confessed. "Offer me $500 cash if I will report safety issues on your farm." When I refused, she hinted that I might suddenly notice problems anyway. My gut went cold. This was not petty neighbor complaints. This was a calculated strategy to bury me in false violations until the land became too costly to defend. And that was when I realized the truth. She was preparing to steal my future. The confirmation came one scorching afternoon when I headed out to check the irrigation system. Voices carried across the fence. I ducked behind the old tool shed and peered through the slats. There she stood with a man in the tailored suit, gesturing toward my fields as if she were presenting a sales pitch. 8 acres, she said confidently. Perfect for townhomes. The farmer will not hold out much longer. 6 months at most. The man scribbled notes and nodded. Timeline for vacant possession? Guaranteed before October. Farmers always cave under the right pressure. My blood turned to ice. They were negotiating over land that was not for sale, my land, the land my grandfather had carved from wilderness with his bare hands. It was not about noise or tractors. It was about commission checks and developer money. That night, I called Jake, an old Army buddy turned agricultural lawyer. I explained what I had overheard. His voice was sharp. Document everything. They will escalate. And Marcus, watch your back. I hung up and found Denise waiting on the porch with 2 beers. Her eyes searched mine. "Everything okay?" I looked at her, at the field stretching into the twilight, at the life we had built here. "No," I said quietly. "I think we are about to find out how far people will go for money." And I was right, because the petty complaints were about to transform into something far more dangerous. The next morning, I caught the smell before I saw it. A sharp, oily stench hung in the air near my equipment shed. Someone had spilled diesel around the fuel tank. Not enough to destroy the machinery, just enough to prove they could get close whenever they wanted. Days later, Harold returned with more grim news. She had been going door to door, offering money for neighbors to report false safety issues. Some refused. A few seemed tempted. It was clear she was building an army of liars. By the end of the week, a private investigator was spotted lurking near my property. According to Harold, the man specialized in manufacturing evidence for civil cases. Word spread that they were planning to stage chemical spills, dead fish in the creek, even fabricated noise complaints. I realized with dread that this was not simply harassment. This was organized fraud. Meanwhile, false reports flooded the county offices. Allegations of excessive water usage. Claims of hazardous storage. All of it fabricated. A county inspector showed up one morning with documents claiming I was pumping water at levels triple the average farm. Impossible! My well was over 60 years old and could not have pumped that much water if it ran 24 hours a day. As I walked him across the property, he whispered, "Marcus, this feels orchestrated. Get your own tests done fast." That night, I installed my first motion-activated trail cameras. I knew they were coming back, and I wanted every move recorded in black and white. What happened next proved that paranoia was justified. At 2 a.m, one of the cameras captured a figure creeping along my eastern fence line. She carried a spray container, methodically dousing my corn with herbicide. By morning, 20 feet of crops had turned a sickly brown. The camera caught her face, the license plate of her car, even the brand of poison she carried. The very next day, I confirmed her purchase at the local farm supply store. I had her. Solid evidence of crop destruction, trespassing, and intent. A felony offense. But part of me knew this was still only the beginning, because cornered people do desperate things, and her financial survival depended on breaking me before her deadline ran out. The shift came the moment I realized I no longer had to play defense. With every camera, every receipt, and every witness statement, I was building an ironclad case. I upgraded my surveillance, installing heat-sensitive cameras, motion detectors, and even decoys to confuse anyone snooping. The farm began to feel less like a homestead and more like a military perimeter. Harold became my inside man, feeding me details about secret association meetings. He told me she had promised developers a completed deal by October 1st, less than 6 weeks away. Failure would mean $50,000 in penalties and the loss of her commission. Worse, she had already borrowed against that expected payout. Suddenly, her desperation made sense. Every act of sabotage, every attempt to fabricate violations, every bribe, it was all fueled by mounting financial ruin. Meanwhile, Denise dug into agricultural protection laws and uncovered something powerful: a conservation easement. If filed, it would permanently protect our land from development. Once approved, the property would be untouchable. The next morning, I paid the fee and filed the paperwork. From that moment forward, even if she somehow forced me to sell, the developers would not be able to touch the land. Her $2 million deal was nothing but worthless paper. But I kept that information close. Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy never sees until it is too late. By late summer, the tension had reached breaking point. Sabotage equipment, cut hydraulic lines, loosen trailer bolts. Each act more reckless than the last. Each act recorded on camera. Then came Harold with a report that turned my blood to ice. "She is planning to set a fire," he whispered. She bought camping fuel. Said it would look like faulty wiring caused it. The thought of fire in a drought-stricken cornfield was more than terrifying. It could wipe out not only my farm, but half the neighborhood as well. So I prepared. I bought portable pumps, filled emergency tanks, and stationed fire retardant chemicals across the property. Most importantly, I spoke with Fire Chief Morrison, an old Army friend. I asked him, hypothetically, what evidence was required to prove arson. His answer was simple: footage, accelerant residue, and proof of premeditation. 2 nights later, my cameras picked up movement. 2 heat signatures creeping along the eastern line, carrying fuel containers. Through infrared binoculars, I watched as they poured liquid along a 100-foot strip of corn. "This will look like equipment malfunction," she whispered to her accomplice. At 11:52 p.m., she flicked a lighter. Flames erupted instantly, racing through the dry stalks. But within 90 seconds, the fire department roared up my gravel drive. Sirens cut through the night, lights flashing, engines spraying torrents of water across the blaze. She froze, mouth open, as the very people she thought would arrive too late came charging in almost immediately. Her confidence dissolved into sheer terror. When Fire Chief Morrison stepped from the truck, illuminated by the very flame she had lit, his voice was cold steel. "Step away from the fire. You are under arrest." Caught red-handed. The timing could not have been more perfect. That very night, a council meeting was underway in town, where residents debated new ordinances about agricultural land. She had planned to use it as her alibi. Instead, it became the stage for her downfall. The fire chief's radio crackled with a report. Suspects detained at the scene with accelerants. Gasps filled the chamber. Council members demanded answers. Then I stood. "Mr. Mayor, if I may," I said, holding a folder thick with evidence. Inside were photographs, recordings, receipts, months of documented harassment. Harold rose beside me, confirming every word. The mayor's face darkened as I played the audio of her promising developers vacant land by October. The room erupted in whispers. Then I dropped the final bombshell. 3 weeks ago, I filed a conservation easement. This land can never be developed. Not by her. Not by anyone. The realization rippled through the chamber like thunder. Everything she had fought for, everything she had destroyed herself for, had been in vain. Deputies strode in, placing her in handcuffs before the eyes of the entire community. The smug expression was gone, replaced by pale shock. The queen of the Homeowners Association was reduced to nothing more than a criminal in custody. 6 months later, the fields are alive again. Sarah is bottle-feeding a calf by the barn. Emma is driving my grandfather's old John Deere, turning soil for the next season. Their futures are secure. Tuition paid in full, debts avoided. My wife, once a schoolteacher, has become a paralegal, working with Jake to defend other farmers facing similar harassment. Harold, once the quiet retiree, is now a local hero, teaching others how to recognize and resist fraudulent schemes. As for my neighbor, she pleaded guilty to arson, conspiracy, and fraud. 2 years in prison. $50,000 in restitution. Her real estate license permanently revoked. The developers, facing exposure, paid heavy fines and quietly disappeared. But the true victory was larger. Our fight inspired new state laws protecting farmland from harassment. 17 families in our county have already filed conservation easements, preserving 300 acres from development forever. Walk in my fields now. I run my hand across the rough bark of the oak tree my grandfather once leaned against. The sun sets golden across the corn, and I realize this battle was never just about me. It was about protecting what matters, heritage, community, and the right to live without fear of greed disguised as progress. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is not destruction. It is survival. It is standing tall when others try to knock you down. And it is knowing that, in the end, the land endures, the family endures, and justice has the final word.